All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, FCM community. It is your annual Draft Pod recap. This year it is myself and Maddie per normal, and Gilly has decided to join us. He is here on camera because nobody knows why, but he is. So if anybody actually joins during the live session, they can see his face periodically smiling and making other weird human-like gestures. Until then, however, we're going to continue to talk in our normal fashion. So, as always, for those of you who've listened before, for those of you who may not have, we start at pick number 1 and work our way down through pick number 30, hopefully doing it in under a 3-hour time span. After that, if there's any picks in the second round and beyond that we like or that we think are worth mentioning, we will do so after getting through the top 30. And then we will end it in some inane fashion. So, good evening to everybody that has joined us, and let us begin with pick number 1. Pick number 1 this year is the Dodgers taking Andy Park, 19-year-old left-handed right fielder. Matt, let's go to you first. What did you think of Park?
I think he was pretty easy number 1 overall pick. He has that. Well, it's not the 5-tool player, but so he's the 4-tool player. The contact will be there. The power will obviously be there. The eye is there, and the arm and fielding. So yeah, it's just simple. It's pretty easy to pick a left-handed bat who you can stick in at number 3 and just watch be a big-time hitter.
Yeah, I think there was a lot to like for Park. I agree. Probably one of the better, if not the best, bats in the draft this year. And I hate to say it, but I don't think he actually pops up on my one list, just because he was drafted before the file came out, and that threw off my my draft card. But I'm assuming he ranked pretty high. I mean, he looks really good. He definitely passes all the eye tests. So the only concern I would have is just that it seems like a lot of the guys taking number 1 overall that were not a pitcher, or even maybe a speed guy, have not fared overly well in the last decade and a half. But I don't think that's any reason not to take somebody like this, who definitely shows a well above average ability to be potentially very good once he maxes out in the big leagues. Gilly, what'd you think about Park?
Yeah, I don't think we have to spend a lot of time on him. I mean, he's got everything you want. He's got defense. He's young. He has great high school stats. Got a lot of room to improve. I mean, it's been a while that I've seen such a clear number 1, at least from a power bat perspective. I mean, he's left-handed, so he's going to crush the ball. So I like him a lot. I mean, for me, there wouldn't have been a guess as to who's going to be going first. I mean, this is a pretty clear-cut pick.
All right. Gilly goes to the clear cut. I think there definitely could be some argument with some of these guys we're going to talk about here in a minute for potentially going 1 overall. But yeah, I definitely would not knock the pick. Number 2 overall goes to Milwaukee. Milwaukee takes Kevin Lane, who is a pitcher that I absolutely love. He's 16. He's a lefty. He has that. He just has that ace build. I mean, honestly, there's no other way to talk about it. He just had that build that screams, I should be an ace. Control, power, both 10 over his overall, movement 2 under. A nice repertoire of 4 different pitches. Fastball is not his best pitch, which is not ideal for somebody that could be a power pitcher, potentially. But and his amateur numbers were not phenomenal. But they weren't bad. I really like this guy. I know that pre-draft somebody asked me what I thought about Lane, and I said he was the first pitcher I'd probably take, just because I think he has that really high-end potential and looks quite good. And again, Mogul tends to like those 16-year-olds and give them plenty of time to develop. So he should have time to develop. And should develop into probably one of the better pitchers, if not the best pitcher out of this draft. Gilly, what'd you think about him?
I like the pick here. I think it was too early. Lane was 3rd on my list for pitchers. I mean, if you believe in high school stats, he gives up a few home runs, at least in the senior year. More, I mean, from a home run perspective per inning pitched. You know, again, I would have looked at the center fielder that was taken a little bit later. I think Devincenio or Halverson too. Either one of those guys I like better than Lane at 2. Lefty's fine. I think it's overblown. I don't think necessarily lefty. This whole lefty mystique of they're not good pitchers. I think that's kind of been proven false over time. I don't know. I just have a little bit of problem taking young guys, at least from a pitcher perspective, early. I don't know. It just seems like there's so much variability that if I was drafting, I would have taken one of the either Senzo. I don't know. Devin Senzo. Thank you. Or Howerson before I picked Lane. So don't like the pick here. I think he would have been better off picking one of those outfielders.
Maddie, what'd you think about Lane?
Well, I could go 2 words, and I just forgot them. Oh yeah, Jacob Widdop. That's a very, very old reference. If he develops the way he should, he could very easily be another Widdop. Which he was a lefty. If you don't know, but people don't know, lefty who dominated, was one of the best pitchers back in the old days of FCM, the early days, if you will. There's just a lot to like about that. I wouldn't really worry about the repertoire, mostly because I don't think it matters worth dick. But even if you do think about that, I do kind of think that Mogul treats circle change kind of like a sinker. So if you think about his sinker is actually his number 1 pitch, he's a power pitcher. That 35% ground ball rate probably isn't that bad. So yeah, I think he has the potential to be an all 90s pitcher. Even if that power doesn't quite reach the 90s, if that control and movement does, and the power's close, yeah, he'll be damn good.
I agree. Damn good is probably the way he ends up. Florida picks 3rd. Florida picks right fielder Mike Halverson. This is a guy I could have seen going 1 overall. I mean, I feel like we see these guys go 1 overall more often than not. A guy with high contact, high speed already at 20. Does turn 20 here toward the end of the season, mid-September. He's got a phenomenal glove, really good range, really, really good range, good arms, good fielding. Health's not too high. I mean, again, this is a guy I could have seen making an argument for at 1 overall, especially when you look at his amateur stats. Everything seems to be coming up Millhouse on that end. So OPS looks really good. Little dip that in the most recent year, but other than that, looks really good for a guy that's not going to be a power hitter. Average is high, still basically like everything just looks really good. So really like this pick. Obviously, the lack of true upside that Matty could talk to could be a concern. But at 20, depending on what the drop we see here in the end of September, this could be one of those guys you kind of build around. So definitely a cornerstone potential out of this pick. Matty, what do you think of Halverson?
I think he's more over just a big cock tease. He looks fancy and all that, but like you kind of already hinted at, there's a lack of upside to him. And there's just some red flags of where I wouldn't spend a pick this early on a guy like that. He has the speed, but I don't think he's going to be a really big time steal threat. I think he'll be one of those guys that's just very efficient. Be a guy who will steal 25 or 30 bases and maybe only get picked off 2 or 3 times. Very, very efficient, but he won't be that guy that's going to be that 90s speed guy that's going to steal you 50, 60 bases. I don't see that with him. And just the lack of upside, and of course, with his build being a very low contact eye, I think there's a lot of fluff in that. In the did I say contact? I mean, yeah, very low strikeout guy. So I think there's a lot of fluff in that contact. So I don't think he'll hit for the average that you think, especially within Florida. That'll be even more repressed, I guess. I see him being a serviceable center fielder. And that's about it.
Gilly, thoughts?
I liked him. I mean, I think I like where he's picked at. I don't see him first overall. Or much of an argument for that. I think he plays good defense. Like Maddie said, he'll be very efficient. He's got good speed, but his steal tendency isn't super high compared to Zach. So definitely like the fact that, I mean, he's got good high school numbers and college numbers. Not that it matters, but he's going to be a guy that'll hit number 2 for you. Won't hit for power. If he gets a good jump, he could be special. So again, I like where he was picked. Don't think he would have been the overall number 1 pick though.
And I know as far as the big board's concerned, he just barely cracked the top 25, so plenty of other talent on the board, potentially, but usually those speed guys tend to go a lot higher than people expect more often than not. Cleveland's up next at 4 overall. Cleveland takes Zach DiVincenzo, a 17-year-old switch hitter with a little bit of speed and a glove that is a little bit wanting, but should be pretty good once he finally fleshes out. Bandy, this is your pick. Why don't we go to you first, and why don't you tell me why you took Zach at 4 overall?
Because he's awesome.
Fair enough. All right.
But pretty easy to see that. Yeah, you see the defense and you go, oh, that's not that good. But you figure that he's 17 years old with all the upside he has. It's gonna be pretty decent. He'll have 80-something range, close to 80 field, and the arm's never gonna be anything. But you stash him out in left field, and you just don't give a shit. And if you really need to, you still probably can play him in center field with his speed, as well as the solid range. I think he's really kind of like a dynamic bat because even though he's more of a contact build, just based on his amateur numbers, there's something there with the power that he'll be able to hit for a few homers. Where we'll end up, who knows? And he's a very nice steal threat. He steals a lot. You really want the tendency to be above the base steal, and I know this says that his decision making isn't all that great, but I don't think it matters all that much. I see the fact that he stole 10 bases, 9 bases, 11 bases. Yeah, that's a guy that I want. And of course, he's a switch hitter, so yeah, let's go for it.
It'll be interesting to see how he fleshes out. I know I took a switch hitter that I liked that, again, had some decent speed, but not great speed, and Frederick June a few drafts back, and it turned out pretty all right. So Glove's not quite there the same with Zach, but again, you're right. It should be more than well suited for left field. Gilly, what did you think about the guy who you can't pronounce?
Yeah, I'll just say Zach. I'm not even going to try. I like him. I like that he's a switch hitter. I really like that he's 17.
Yeah.
No surprise there. I think his defense will improve over time as he grows. I think there's plenty of room for him to just explode, and you're going to see the numbers go up. Like Maddie said, he's going to steal a lot more bases, won't be as efficient. It's kind of funny. We've got 3 guys in a row here that I can't remember the last time we had like 3 decent speed guys go in the top 5. Usually you see 1 guy that stands out, maybe 2, but 3. That's pretty unique, at least from my memory. Maybe we've had more. And I think Maddie's right. He might be able to hit some home runs, put him in the right park. Who knows? He could get 15 home runs, steal 25, 30 bases, and hit for 300, 320, and play good defense. So I like him.
All right, we will move on to Cheeto's pick at 5, and that is Nigel Cantrell, a 19-year-old right fielder who has the speed. Maybe not the need for it, but he has the speed, and he's got a good glove and a low health bar. A lot of things to like with that potential makeup. His amateur numbers were not ideal. His last year, he had a 593 OPS. Stolen bases were pretty good, especially compared to his caught stealing. Not that matters as much in amateur numbers. Again, glove really good, health low, which will be maybe a good thing and a bad thing. There's kind of a limit to how low you want that health to be, where it doesn't affect you too much negatively, but also gives you those extra bumps when you're developing. I like this guy. I mean, this is a guy that his contact is only 1 below his overall contact. against right-handed hitters, which is good. I mean, he's not going to have any power. But if that speed goes up, which it should, the contact in the eye, I mean, you're looking at a guy that could be a very good player if everything kind of settles out. And again, the only thing that I'd have some concern about that is his amateur numbers were, especially that last year in high school, were not ideal. But if you don't worry about that too much, then you wait and see. Again, 19 turns 20 here at the end of at the start of the offseason. Should have time to develop. And could end up one of those bats. You know, it'll be fun to watch him versus Halverson, versus DiVincenzo and some of these other guys, and kind of see how this outfield core kind of piles out. Because there was some other good outfielders I think we'll hit up later, but definitely top heavy with outfielders this draft. Maddie, what do you think of Cantrell?
Well, Cantrell is Maverick and Halverson is Goose. I do like Cantrell a lot more. There's just a lot more upside, obviously, there. But really, I think they're very similar builds. I know you can say that, well, one guy has 81 contact, and the guy doesn't even have 70 contact. But I don't really care about that because Cantrell's contact's still going to shoot up there a lot. And I think by the time he reaches, it can be by the time he reaches Halverson's overall, he could have the same contact. I just think there's a lot more to gain out of drafting him than it would be Halverson, because at least you have a pretty good idea, or at least suggestion that Cantrell should have, 5 or 6 years to develop, whereas Halverson could very easily just have like 2 or 3 years to develop. So I take him, and I take Cantrell, and his base running, or at least his steal tendency, is a little bit closer to his steal ability. So I think he'll be a little bit better in the steal department as well.
Gilly, what do you think about Nigel?
I like him as a player. I'm actually surprised the pitcher didn't go here in this spot. Like Maddie said, I think you get a little bit more upside with Cantrell than you do Halverson. Halverson's a little bit older. He does have better contact right now, but like as Maddie said, I think you're going to see Cantrell's shoot up, especially if he gets a good jump, if he puts him in winter ball. So yeah, I mean, I like him. It doesn't surprise me he went here, but I could have seen maybe a pitcher go here. One of the 2 or 3 remaining that went, basically the next 4 picks. So we do have an infatuation with speed, which, if Cheeto's going for center fielder and kind of lock that position away, he's not a bad get.
Yeah, well, it'll be fun to see how this class develops out with some of these speed, non-speed guys. Montreal picks 6th. Montreal picks Bill Rowland. Might be Rowell. No, I want to go with Rowland. A 19-year-old right-handed pitcher, a power pitcher, believe it or not, with solid movement, a little bit lower control. Amateur numbers are very good. Home runs don't seem to be an issue. Strikeout to walkout ratio is nice. A lot of things to like about this individual, including the fact that he has 2 dominant pitches at 19 years old. A lot of things to like about Bill Rowland. I know he was on some people's number 2 pitcher on the board. I know there's a lot of people that are probably already in the chat whining that Rabine did not go as the number 2 pitcher off the board. But listen, after Lane, I mean, I did like Rowland quite a bit, and possibly the next best. For as much as I do think, and we'll get to him, Rabine, in a minute, could be a good pitcher. I don't know. I'd probably go Rowland in this part of the draft as well. Gilly, you did go Rowland. Wi-Fi is already making fun of you, but I would ignore him. Why did you go Rowland over Rabine?
No, good question. So if you watched at least a couple of my last couple drafts, I've been drafting more power pitchers. Probably not as spending as much emphasis on ground ball rate. I do tend to look at home runs per innings pitched. I liked that he had 2 pitches that were at his age really, really good. And I'm sure the circle change will get better as he gets more growth, maybe even pick up a fourth pitch. I looked at a lot of comps and I looked at, okay, what could he be even if he just gets some average across all comps, not the best, but not the worst, but just conservative averages. And I liked what I saw. So yeah, there was a lot to like. The only downside is he's got a little bit of a health issue. So it might cut back on his innings pitched. I was really I was flipping a coin between him and Rabine. The other reason I picked Roland is because at 19, I saw what he looked like at 16 with Rabine. There wasn't as, I guess, he wasn't as mature in his advancement. So there's more variables there. Now he could turn out to be a better pitcher. We'll see in a few years, but I liked Roland's power. I liked his pitches. And I liked his comps that I saw. And the fact that he doesn't give up a lot of home runs as a power pitcher could be influenced a little bit by his fastball and splitter in high school. So don't want to overemphasize that, but we'll see. It may turn out to be a bad pick in hindsight. We'll look back and say, well, shit, I should have drafted Rabine. We'll find out.
Hindsight is always 2020. Maddie.
I have a question for Gilly. If we held the draft on June 16th, would you have taken Rabine in this pick?
I don't know what Rabine looks like right now.
I'll go to his vitals page and you'll figure out what I'm referencing.
Well, yeah, his birthday is June 15th.
Yeah, so if he was held the 16th, you'd probably been taking him.
Maybe.
Yeah, you're no fun. Anyway, so Roland, yeah, I like the talent, but I was very truthful to say he wasn't on my list in the chat for anyone that remembers that, because his health is just complete ass. I just do not want to trust a guy like this just ever, unless I know you're going to be Lou Cook. You're Lou Cook, yeah, sure, you can have a negative 1800 health. I don't care, but just Roland looks like a guy who you're only going to be able to rely on for about 25 starts every season, because he's going to be on the DL for 2 to 3 months, doing whatever in the hell he does on the DL for 2 to 3 months. But it's certainly possible that when he's healthy, he could be a very good pitcher. He projects out very well, very interesting. Kind of seeing this like power pitcher renaissance, if you will. So he could be a part of that. He projects out to be an 81 control, 88 power, and a 92 movement pitcher. Be interesting to see where he hits, and that's of course saying that he hits in the 90s peak. So I think he'll be a good pitcher, but I would just be concerned that you're not going to get full usage out of him, which you could from some other pitchers drafted later.
And speaking of pitchers drafted later, the very next pick in the draft is yet again a pitcher, with the Red Sox coming in at number 7, taking Ryan Kangaskhan, a 17-year-old right-handed pitcher. It was an interesting pick. Not sure I would have gone in this direction. He does project to be one of the top 3 pitchers in the draft. Does project to have quite nice vitals. Has 3 good pitches, all above his overall. But that control power that's tied. We've seen a lot of pitchers like that in the draft, I'd say in the last decade or two. And they've been quite hit or miss. Either they turn out good or quite good, but I feel like more often than not, they tend to falter. There was one a while back, Arenado, I believe there was like a 71-71, something similar on draft day, and he just did not equate out to anything worth having in the end. And the fact that he has a high ground ball rate with that high power is either going to be a really good thing or not make a damn bit of difference. Amateur stats were okay. Nothing that screams great. But let's be honest, Fred builds his team off just drafting alone and tends to go through these periods of really good contention and usually bags a World Series. So if he likes Kangas, I'm gonna trust his judgment on that. So, Maddie, what'd you think about Kangas?
You're talking about the guy you took, Arredondo, Omar Arredondo.
I thought Stang or somebody else took him, but yeah, that might have been the same one.
Well, because that's not the same pitcher at all. But I would say I really like Kangas. That's the reason why not to take this guy at this point. Like a good starting control and power. I don't know that I'd really read into it too much that they're even on draft day, because one jump and it can completely change everything. He has a good ground ball rate. The home runs, not much to worry about, like one season. And the fact that he's 17 years old, 52 overall, 53 movement, I really wouldn't care too much about that. If you dig the repertoire stuff, it's pretty decent. Three pitch mix, and yeah, you gotta like it. And we'll see pretty quickly just how long he'll have to develop. But of course, being 17 years old, you still have a long time to develop.
So this was Angel Arredondo, who was drafted way back in '86 by Atlanta, and then traded to Colorado, where he kind of faltered. So not Omar Arredondo, but Angel Arredondo. Gilly, your thoughts on Kangas?
I had him as the number 4 on my list for pitchers. He's got a lot of upside. And nothing. I'm not going to say anything different than what's already been said. It just whether or not he hits on his jumps, that's going to be the biggest thing. Because I looked back and I don't remember seeing any comps that stuck out at me that it's like, oh my gosh, this is what he could be. I just don't recall seeing it when I looked back through the files. I could have missed somebody, but yeah. I mean, he's got a lot of endurance, so I don't know how much the peak's taking that into account. But I mean, he's got some room to grow. Rabine was my choice at this pick. Just at least compared to Kangas, I would have seen Rabine here, but like you said, Fred does a lot through the draft, and so he's had some success with it. So I'm not going to argue with it.
Well, everybody keeps talking about Rabine, which means the real Angus Khan was probably tickled pink to see Rabine fall to him all the way at 8. The way everybody talks about him since the post draft here, you make it think that he should have been number 1 overall pick. But Jace Rabine, 16-year-old right-hander, does have a birthday coming up tonight. I believe tonight. Andy might release him to the 15th, so we might not see it tonight. We might see it Sunday. Wait, today's Thursday. My apologies. But he is a 16-year-old pitcher who we will see a drop here either tonight or Thursday night, which could be telling one way or the other. But this is a guy with a 65% ground ball rate, 2 good pitches, fastball and a changeup, and a curve to follow it up. Again, has a high power, but is a ground ball pitcher by trait. So it'll be interesting to see how he plays out. Obviously, his amateur stats are pretty fine. He projects to be a solid pitcher. I know his Vital projections probably are not what everybody would expect, but they are, as stated, projections, not guarantees. So I think he'll probably end up being one of the better pitchers out of the draft. How good? We'll obviously, every time we Madden on this, we'll see. So, Gilly, you've talked about him a little bit. What do you think about Rabine?
Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, it was a 50-50 between him and Roland. Things I do like. I like his ground ball rate. In this case, it matches with his home runs given up, innings pitched. So I like that. His endurance and health are good. They're not too high. They're not too low. Vital-wise, they look good. You like to see that make up because movement's going to be jumping quite a bit, and you'll get some movement you'll get some bump on the control and a little bit on the power, but a lot on the movement. So if he hits it, and if he jumps potentially in winter ball or gets a bump there, and he's projected and growth is good, then he's going to turn out to be a really good pitcher. He's got 2 pitches already above his overall. I don't know. I think what led me to pick Roland is just where he's at, and the fact I've been taking some power pitchers lately. Also, I don't know what it is, but I've been burned a few times on really young pitchers and the long trajectory they have. I don't know.
Prison's tough, isn't it?
What's that?
Prison's tough, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So definitely staying away from the 16-year-olds. So it was a coin flip. I don't know. It's one of those things. You just pull the trigger on your gut feel and you go with it.
And that's how you end up in prison. Maddie, what do you have on him?
Yeah, so he was the guy who I was going back and forth between. Do I take him at number 4 or Evan Senzo? Really, it was tough to walk away from a guy with this kind of a ground ball rate. And for the guy, again, if you like the repertoire stuff, you have 2 pitches that are above the overall one, quite a bit above. No real issues with the home runs. Just everything that you like about the guy. Of course, the guy's really young. It would be a surprise if he would peak out early. There's a lot to love, but for me, it was just the fact that I feel like I could get pitching later in the draft, which, spoiler alert, I did. However, it's not all about that. Rabin, perfect pick right here. You can't go wrong. I would not be surprised if he is one of the better pitchers in the draft, but I don't think it's some crazy forecasting out of the GMs that keep wanting to say this stuff, because I wouldn't be surprised if Kangas is awesome. I wouldn't be surprised if Lane is awesome. I mean, it's just really about how Mogul wants to take their development. I don't know if there's some special thing that you can say about them. They're different builds all around, which is really interesting about this draft. There were some real interesting builds on the young pitchers, so be cool to see which guys progress through. And kind of like I said, I mean, you can have like one jump change things, like there's been sometimes in the past, in the very, very distant past, where we've had to do some resims, and you see a jump, out of your pitching, you're just stoked. And then, okay, something was screwed up, you had to resim. You resim it out, the guy didn't jump. Then he jumps like 2 sims later, and the jump is nothing like you previously saw, and that just changes his development path forever. So it'll be interesting. Very, very good pick. Very good, very, very good value right here too. I really expected him to go very quickly after I picked, to be honest.
I think a lot of that more than likely had to do with the fact that everybody went with those outfield bats with a little bit of speed to them. Kind of pumped him down a little bit further than maybe he otherwise could have or should have gone. But again, Toronto picked next. Toronto picked Thomas Furnes, 16-year-old relief pitcher. Very good amateur numbers. I mean, very good amateur numbers. Doesn't project to be super dominant in the closer spot, projects to be pretty good. Surprised. I was quite surprised to see him come off the board this early. I mean, there's a lot to like about him. Not only the age, the vitals, the peak, the overall, all the stuff. But I just not a guy that I would have taken in the top 10. And I do take relief pitchers much earlier than almost everybody else. But I felt like there was other relief pitchers in this draft that were going to be potentially as good as him that you could have taken much later. Maybe that doesn't end up being the case, but it just seemed like a bit of a reach to me. Maddie, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I like the talent. He's a really young pitcher. Of course, obviously a lot of upside. The ground ball rate's there. You really like the fact that he has 2 years of 0 home runs. I mean, as I've kind of said in a previous draft pods, Mogul doesn't do that by mistake. Especially 2 years. I don't really care about the 5-year. It's not even high. But the fact that there's 2 0 years makes me think this guy might be someone who rarely, if ever, gives up long ball. Just still, the one thing I would always question is taking a reliever this early in the draft, unless you have a pretty good idea that he's going to be dominant, like the pitcher that GB took many years ago for Detroit, Nicanor Marquez, I think. That guy just had to look like he's going to be a great power pitcher on draft day, and yeah, that's the guy who looked like it's going to be a dominant closer, and he was. Hernandez just looks like he could be a good closer rather than a dominant closer, and I don't really care about that he has a 93 peak, because ever believing that a reliever is going to hit their peak is usually just it's retarded, is what it is. They always seem to just peak out around like the mid 80s. Maybe you get a guy that hits in the upper 80s. Maybe you're one of the few lucky ones that gets a guy to peak out in the 90s, but it seems they very rarely do what you think that they're actually going to do. The ones who do are just complete lucky. However, I would wonder this. The ground ball rate with the home runs. Does Toki just roll the dice and turn him into a starter? I think that could be sneaky good. That could be sneaky good if you do that. Especially with our... shut up. With our pitch limit. Even if you don't think he's going to be a good starter, throw a 20 pitch count limit on him when he's a 70 stamina guy and throw him the bullpen anyways. You can have the option to do both. So what I'm saying is, everyone out there, make every reliever a starter, because you can always throw a pitch count limit on him.
That's right, guys. Break the system. Gilly, what'd you think?
Too early. I'm with Maddie on that. I would have expected him to go in the top 20, maybe not in the top 10. Didn't Jay Main take a elite level closer a few drafts ago? I can't remember his name, but I was trying to go back and look, and I can't remember. Anybody? And does that ring a bell at all? If not, no big deal. But
you mean the one that is currently on the Yankees? Brian Mullock?
Yeah. When did he go?
Oh, making me do research during a pod.
15th overall.
15th, and I'd have to go back and look what he looked like on draft day, but I think he was, vitals wise, he looked better. I'd have to go back and look. More power, if I remember right.
I'm gonna guess he had power just based off of where his strikeouts are in the majors.
Yeah, I remember him having more power. But yeah, I think it was a little early. A lot of room to grow. I probably wouldn't make him a starting pitcher just because as a practice, unless he's got a little bit more endurance. I think you get a little bit more value out of him as a closer if he gets there. If he picks up another pitch, I think he's going to be even better. But yeah, overall, 16, he's got a lot of room to grow. Maybe taking a little early.
I think that his projections show him to be similar to Tim Brame, who went 14 overall a few years back. So we'll see. We'll see. Hokie might be right, and he might end up being quite good. Though, if there's one person I'm going to have pick relief pitchers for me, I hate to say it, especially with him listening in right now, it'd be Peter, who tends to pick relief pitchers and be right 90% of the time. Maybe he only drafts relief pitchers and I just never not notice. But, if I wanted somebody's opinion on a relief pitcher, he'd be the one I would ask. So don't tell him I said that. Moving on in the draft, we will move on to 10 and 11. Back-to-back Kansas City picks. Kansas City take Maurice McRobbie and Jeremy Curtin. With those picks, McRobbie is a right-handed first baseman. That nice-looking power eye build with quite good OPS and solid averages and slugging and all that. His amateur numbers, home runs aren't through the roof in the amateur numbers. But I think there's a lot to like in this pick. This is one of the guys that was higher on my list, in case he fell further than he should. Jeremy Curtin is a 17-year-old left-handed and left-hitting right fielder with some solid range. A little bit of speed, a little bit of contact, a little bit of eye, not a lot of power, a lot of bunting. Would be a very good number 2 hitter. with a good glove. So you could see with 17 and plenty of room to grow. Though he does have OPSs that generally make me stay away from amateur hitters. There's some room to grow there, being at his age group. He does turn 18 here at the end of the season on the 30th of September. So we'll see what, if anything, that does to him, or if he has to jump between now and then. But I really liked McRobbie. I thought he had a very projectable bat that should have just tremendous power, good contact, and a good eye. Wasn't as high on Curtin, but still should be a pretty damn good two-hole bat. Gilly, what do you think of these guys?
Yeah, I liked McRobbie. He was number 5 on my offensive player board. I liked him and Jones a lot. I ended up picking Jones later, so they both looked very similar. Jones just had a little bit more power. I can see McRobbie's defense is a little lacking. Maybe he'll be a DH. Maybe he'll play some spot left field. But overall, good power numbers. Definitely like the pick. I could see this happening quite a bit. So he's going to be one of those guys that projects really well and hit a lot of home runs. So I don't think there's any issue with that pick. I did like Curtin quite a bit. I can't remember looking back at the draft. I looked at comps like Curtin, and typically if these guys hit, they're hitting 92 contact, 90s contact with some 80 power, stealing some bases, hitting 2-hole for you, and playing right field, good defense. Like, I like Curtin, that build, because I wasn't sure what, anytime you see a player that has contact, speed, eye above their overall, he's kind of a doubles guy, or at least a number 2-hole hitter that doesn't steal a lot of bases but gets on base and hits some home runs. There was quite a few comps that showed that, and that's what I had Curtin on my board too. So I liked Curtin quite a bit. I think these were 2 good picks.
Maddie.
McRobbie is really damn good. Is kind of guy that I was low key hoping that would fall till 28. I knew that wouldn't fall that far in the draft like this, but yeah, guy's going to be a big time power guy. The contact should get pretty decent as well. Don't really care about the defense. You can slot him in at first base or DH him. Real good player. Now, Curtin. I've seen this guy before. I thought he was going to be awesome. He was not. He looks like a carbon copy of Keith Oshel, who I had on my very old Indian team. And he's just a guy that in his prime, he was basically a 725 OPS guy. Now, he had a really nice average, but didn't walk a whole lot. Power was almost all doubles, very, very few home runs. And the steals were not there at all. And I see the exact same thing with Curtin. I don't think he's going to steal a lot, 10, 15. Maybe you can squeeze out 20. Who cares? Whatever. It's just not going to be anything of a factor offensively, I don't think. Defense, sure, it's there. But again, that's just exactly like Oshel was. You could play him all over the outfield, and he was quality. But the offense, you kept thinking, even with the 90 contact, you're like, okay, this guy's going to do something, and he just never does.
Yeah, hey, Mizzy, real quick, Maddie's saying, I think this league really looks at players. They look at a guy and say, what does he do really well? And, if you're looking at pendulum, they look at, okay, does he hit home runs? Is the power numbers out of just crazy numbers? As a pitcher, does he have a great strikeout, walk ratio, strikeout, innings pitched?
Walkout.
Yeah, home runs per innings pitched. Just really like exceptional numbers in certain areas. Whereas Curtin, I think I liked him, but he could have fallen a little bit, and because he doesn't have anything that stands out to you. There's nothing there that he plays good defense. He does some things well, but he's not a guy that's going to hit you a ton of home runs. He's not going to be a guy that steals 50 bases. He's not going to be a guy that hits 350, 320, 330. So maybe he was drafted a little early. I still like him, but he's going to have to get a little bit better in terms of the build and grow. Maybe he gets a good winter ball to really help him.
Now, if these two picks had been mine, I would have taken McRobbie, and I probably would have taken Greenfield too, and just doubled up on power bats, and just kind of cornerstone them in my lineup for the next decade or so. But I could see the curtain pick, and we'll see how it plays out. So we'll move on, however, to the Cubs. The Cubbies pick 12th. They take Steve Glasson, a 20-year-old right-handed pitcher out of the great state of Oklahoma. This is a guy that has very good amateur numbers. Even his, what you would consider a high home run year, wasn't bad when you compare it to innings pitched. Very good strikeout to walk ratio numbers. Has a very interesting looking build. He's a 2-pitch pitcher, so you're really hoping that he develops that third pitch, and that becomes serviceable. Otherwise, you do worry maybe a little bit on a 2-pitch guy how well he can pitch overall. Projects to be a solid pitcher. I think a nice pick by the Cubs. I'm not sure, or going to say for sure, if there was better pitchers out there. There might have been in the end of the day, but I see why you take Glasson, and I think it probably works out for them in the end. Gilly, we'll go to you first. What do you think about Glasson?
Surprised he didn't go a little sooner. Got some great amateur numbers, obviously. I think the 2 pitches may have scared some folks away. He's great amateur numbers, great power. His movement's going to increase over time. He's going to project really well if he gets a good winter ball and progresses nicely. So great fastball. I think the 2 pitches maybe kept people from looking at him a little earlier. Could have seen this guy go in the place of the relief pitcher, So overall, good pick. I'm surprised he didn't go maybe a little sooner, but decent pick overall by the Cubs.
Maddie.
Oh shit! What are we talking about?
Glasson.
I'm invested in something else. Yeah, he's a guy. It's taken by the Cubs.
Both of those are accurate.
Is his glass half full or half empty?
I'm going neither.
Yeah, I really didn't listen to either what you guys said, so I could be regurgitating everything here. But he was not a guy that was on my list. Let's see why. He's just very middling to me. Balanced build guy is where I see his development heading. Really, I think for me, it was probably in my spot. I didn't want a guy who I didn't think is probably going to have a lot of time to develop, even though he does have high upside, high peak, whatever. I might be just making stuff up at this point, but I don't know. I guess it's a pick. I guess I don't hate him, don't love him, but yeah, he's a guy. So he could be a starting pitcher in the FCM major leagues, or he could not.
He is a guy. The sound of the podcast. Cincinnati goes next. Cincinnati is now on permanent, never a left-handed pitcher picked, and they took a non-lefty in Peter Bruce Wayne, a 19-year-old right-handed starting pitcher with a high ground ball rate, and a very interesting looking build. Everything's above his overall by at least 5. He's got 2 good pitches, 1 solid pitch. Amateur numbers are pretty decent. I'd say this would be one of those picks that I kind of watch, kind of with a bit of a curiosity, not only because it's picked into my division, but I'm curious to see how it plays out in the long run. Because you look at him and you think, this is a bad looking pick. But it also becomes, how does this build exactly play out? Like, this isn't, I don't think, a prototypical build that you see in a lot of draftees. So it'll be very interesting to see where he ends up. I'd say he probably ends up pretty solid. But I don't know if this is a guy that I am going out of my way to pick. I mean, honestly, when I go through and I look at who I have on my draft board, he didn't make my draft board. Glasson did make my draft board as a guy that if he's there and there's nobody else there, sure. But Peter Wayne did not. So it'd be interesting to see how he goes. I'd probably go a half empty on this if we were going to make the same comparison. Maddie, what do you think about Wayne?
Also, by the way, Glasson was on my draft list. I just completely forgot that I even typed his name in. Yeah, Wayne, you don't like the fact that his control is the worst out of the three vitals. I know it's only one worse in the movement, but I think it still matters. And I don't know, but he does have a high ground ball rate, and Mogul can sometimes do some weird things. Just gonna give that control a nice little boost. So maybe it does that here. But I think this is it's like a complete dice roll, and I think there were some better alternatives, and you could actually get something out of. I mean, I think this would be a pick where you're like, fuck, there's really nothing that I feel good about. So let's just take the dice roll. Like that's like a pick 29 guy, where you're like, all these first basemen that might be good, but probably will suck. I won't take them. I'll take this guy instead. See what happens.
Sounds like what happened to me at 27. So, Gilly, what'd you think about Wayne?
Yeah, I was kind of a man. This guy, he's just not. I mean, I would have. It was starting to get a little thin here, and I probably would have looked at some power bats, maybe somebody that does something exceptionally well. This guy's going to need a lot of help. His overall is pretty low. Obviously, his three vitals are above it. Mention control is a little bit. It's one of the three out of the three. It's the lowest. So usually, I see a control a little bit higher, or at least not the lowest out of the group. Ground ball rate's pretty good. Amateur stats are decent. He's got 3 pitches, so if he gets some help and gets a good winter ball, maybe he turns out okay. It was starting to get a little thin here, and I probably would have gone with something that was more of a power bat.
Yeah, there was like 2 power bats left on the board that I liked. And neither of them slipped to me. I was quite disappointed with all of you this year. So, but I think we're all on the same page with Wayne. So, Chicago is up next. Chicago has back-to-back picks. Both of them sucked. So we will just move on to St. Louis, who picks at 16.
Sounds good.
Mike's in the chat. That's the only reason why this is worthwhile. Anyway, so Chicago picks Rob, and that's not who they pick. They pick
Rob
Brian
Zombie?
Jones. No, I was gonna say Rob Jones, but that's who Montreal picks. They pick Brian Jones and Nat Millard. Brian Jones, a 19-year-old right-handed pitcher with a high ground ball rate, a high control, middling power, and solid movement. 2 good pitches. And his last year of high school, he pitched very well. First 3 years, he didn't pitch as well. So it'll be a little bit of a mixed bag there. But especially compared to the last pitcher that we talked about, I did like Brian Jones. He was on my list. I think he has. There's a few guys in this draft pitcher-wise that I think have that like 90-90 control movement potential. And I think this is one of them. I think this is one of those. I will call them the prototypical build that we like to see of just the 90 control, 90 movement that everybody seems to kind of go goo goo gaga over until they hit the trade block, and then they kind of just don't want them anymore. But I think this is a solid pick, and especially as we're talking about in this last pick, that it almost seems to dry up a little bit here in the draft. So I think taking Brian Jones with this pick was a good decision. And I think it was also an interesting decision to take the Nat Millard with the next pick. This is the guy that's getting the Bud Lang comparisons. A lot of this will very much depend on that August 9th birthday, how big that drop is. If it's low and he's got some time to build and grow, then he should be a pretty darn good player. If it's a big drop, you kind of screwed the pooch a little bit on this, maybe. So it'll be interesting to see that 21st birthday rolls around, what happens, and what happens between now and then. I haven't actually looked to see if he had a jump up to this point. So it's possible that he gets a nice jump and then has a little bit of drop, and then Mike looks like a genius for taking Millard at 15 and not in the lower 20s or mid 20s, lower 30s, where he has usually that type of bat and player goes. So overall, I think it's 2 good picks by Mike as he begins yet another rebuild. Gilly, what do you think of these 2 picks?
I liked Nat Millard a lot. I was really looking at him before I traded out in the 15 spot. Just couldn't pull the trigger. There wasn't quite enough upside there for me to do it. If he hits well, he's going to be amazing. He's going to be that shortstop that everybody wishes they had, because there seems to be no shortstops, at least recently, or very few of them in the file. So he's going to be one of those guys that we'll all look back and say, "Damn it, why didn't we?" What round did he go to? Oh, he went 15th. Why didn't he go sooner? Like, we'll look back then and see that and kick ourselves. So definitely liked him. Just couldn't do it personally because of the upside without a lot of help. And then Brian Jones, I liked him. He was on my board. I've been going through more power bats. So I know Chicago likes these control movement guys quite a bit. He's had a lot of success with them, so can't argue with that. He's got 3 pitches, 2 above his overall. So just depends on if he gets there. Has a good winter ball.
Maddie.
Yeah. So alert Mick Jagger, because Brian Jones is actually alive. He's a pretty good pitcher. He's a guy who I really liked. He's a green guy. He has a really nice control, a great ground ball rate. Very projectable. You kind of hit on the projections a bit. That's really where I see him. I mean, that's obviously where the file sees him, and I agree with it. Millard, kind of already hashed it out in the chat there if you've been reading along, but yeah, this is a guy who's a lot of defense and a lot of steals. I don't think he's going to take much in development to be a very, very useful player. Pretty much, really, I don't think he needs to jump at all to be a useful player. And he gets a couple jumps, maybe even 3 jumps, so he'll be a really good player. Just with the speed hounds and the people who have the eye for taking the guy who's going to get the steals, even though they might not have that flashy 90s speed, I'm surprised that he did not go higher. I really am.
People have been taking those guys earlier and earlier, so maybe a bit of a surprise, yeah, but maybe also on par for some of that upper talent that was definitely in the top end of this draft. St. Louis picks next. St. Louis picks 20-year-old catcher Ray Castillo. An interesting pick in my estimation. I like the bat. He's got a kind of a nice control, contact power build. The glove is going to be clandestine. I feel like he's not going to have a real good arm. He's not going to have a lot of good handling. He's not going to have, he's going to have pretty good fielding. I think there was a catcher taken in the next round that I preferred far and above over him. So I've been interested to see St. Louis go this route. I think he hits well, probably for a lot of power with a good OPS. So maybe it works out for St. Louis, but the glove end of it leaves me wanting a little bit. Maddie, what'd you think?
I like him a lot. I was probably surprised because I usually like players with a really big arm or catchers with a really big arm. I think it'll play enough, especially if you're right with your strategies. And the bat, I think the bat could be pretty decent. I think this is a little bit of an overlook if you don't really like him because, sure, he's jumped, but whatever. Still projects to be a very nice bat. This is a guy that I think probably went about right where he should. And you're going to get a solid all-around catcher. He's not going to be amazing, but solid all-around guy at that spot. You don't have that a lot because you usually have either he's really great, a great batter, or he's a really great fielder. You don't really get the blend of he's solid at both.
Kelly, what'd you think?
I liked him. It was one of the guys that I was going to. It was between him and Rob Jones at 17. 17. If Castillo would have fallen to me, I probably would have taken him at 17. I'm not as big on the big arm guys either. I want to see some power out of my catcher. I know past drafts we've had tons of catchers in the draft. Didn't seem that way this year. Not a lot of good catchers this year, especially there's some poor arms, and anybody that did have an arm was not a good pick. Really late drafts. So I want to see his power progress. He hits 72 against righties. You're going to see that jump a little bit. I think over time, he's going to be a decent catcher. I liked him. So decent pick, I think, for St. Louis.
And that brings us to your next pick, which is Rob Jones, 20-year-old right-handed left fielder. This is a guy I thought for sure would fall into my range down in the late 20s. He did not. I like the bat. I love the amateur stats. I love the power. I love the fact that he has a little bit of almost some cheeky 70 speed, even though it's not going to make a damn bit of difference, really do anything for him, except potentially help him a little bit in that left field slot. Maybe actually make him playable in left field spot. Did have a big jump. I believe that was before the draft. I could be wrong. But I like him. I like the 82 health. I like the contact. I like a lot about Rob Jones. Worried about how high his eye goes, just with it so far below his power. I don't think he has that true power eye build. I think his eye lags a little bit, which could detract from how useful he ends up being. But all in all, I liked him. He was definitely a guy that I was looking at, was toward the top of my board for my late 20s pick. So, Gilly, was your pick. Why don't you tell us why you took Rob Jones, other than the fact that Castillo was no longer there?
Yeah, I wanted a power guy. I mean, it was when I was looking at power guys, I was looking at him and McRobbie. Jones has more power. He plays a little bit better defense. Not to say I will play him in left field, but he might be there in a pinch if I need to. I just think he's going to hit a lot of home runs in my park, and I think that I want to take advantage of the park and his ability to hit home runs. So, it was getting later in the draft, in the mid rounds. And so I wanted somebody who had something exceptional. And so felt like he would be able to be that guy and hit some home runs for me. So that's why I took him.
All right, Maddie. And as a bonus question, Maddie, do you want to tell Gilly who has better power that was still left in the draft?
I do. I really do. That's a good question. I do. But we'll get to him in
Three picks. Yeah.
Yep. So I do like the profile. I mean, if you look at him in a vacuum, you know nothing else about what you see. Hell yeah. Let's go for this guy. But I know things because I can see past files. And that's where the love affair takes a sharp left-hand turn. At the March 1st file, he was a 65-85. When guys take that big of a jump, it just concerns me a lot that peak's gonna plummet once he ages. That he won't have a lot of time to develop. So that's a concern. However, it's not all bad, Gilly. Sometimes when they have a really big jump, the peak drop isn't all that much, and you can and after he ages, you could end up with a 71-90 guy. So cool. You still have a hell of a lot of time to develop, and the power could get really good. And yeah, he still does project pretty good. Mid 90s power is what this thing suggests. I don't really know that it's going to get there because sometimes the projections are weird. But yeah, definitely a guy. It's not. I guess overall, it's not a bad pick, but I don't know if it's a great pick. We'll see over the offseason how much he falls. That'll really say if she should have went elsewhere or if he made the right pick.
St. Louis up again. Montreal sandwiching the Montreal pick with pick number 18, taking Josh Cully, a 20-year-old starting pitcher of the ground ball variety. This is a guy that I know I looked at pre-draft as a guy that maybe falls into my range, just because not the typical ground ball guy that you normally see, but his amateur numbers are very, very pretty. Like really good strikeout to walk ratio, low home runs, just everything looks really pretty. And he's a ground ball guy. Like I liked Josh Cully quite a bit in my kind of pre-draft scouting. I'm not sure he ends up being a very good pitcher. There's just he doesn't project to be high end pitcher that you might think he is when you first look at him. But I do like him, and I think that there is some good upside there. And while he doesn't project to be a top end pitcher, he might be one of those guys that bucks those projections and just ends up being quite good anyway. So, Maddie, what do you think about Cully?
Cully, yeah, I liked him. Actually made me do some freaking work to figure out what I really thought of him. Because he not only aged, but he dropped. So I really had to figure out, okay, how much did he actually drop when he aged? Fucker. And the answer is 3 points. Which is not bad at all, you know. You want to do the quick math on that. You've got about, hell, you could have 6-7 years for him to develop. I would say anywhere from 5 to 7. And you just look at the homers. Nothing bad about that. Ground ball rate checks out. The build is, I think, pretty much in that nice, sweet window of what you want for a pitcher. The control is the leading thing. The power is not far behind, and the movement is perfectly balanced in between being low enough below the movement and not too far where you think that the movement just won't catch up. I know that the projections aren't really keen on him, but that's because it gives a penalty for the drop. It's made to worry about those drops, so maybe a little too much. So if you forget about that, I think he winds up with a really good pitcher, but odd that he would take a guy who's more of a ground ball pitcher than his traditional power pitchers, which for GD, sincerely, if you actually intend on using him, holy shit, get a second baseman who's worth a damn at fielding a baseball.
Yeah, need to have that good defense when you take those GB guys. Gilly.
He was on my board. He was actually pretty high on my board. I see him as kind of a high floor, low ceiling guy. Wonder how much of that health eats into his peak. Great, obviously amateur numbers, exceptional amateur numbers. So those are good things. Two pitches right now, good fastball, but will he develop a third one? We'll see. So I think he's gonna, like I said, pretty high floor, maybe just not a super high ceiling.
All right, Philadelphia and Dave is up next. Dave takes Cletus Whedon, a 19-year-old right-handed pitcher.
Whoa. Dropbox changed their shit up. That was freaky. Continue,
anyway,
please.
Cletus Fuckhat Whedon is a average 19-year-old pitcher with an interesting build, interesting pitch repertoire, mundane or clandestine amateur numbers, but a pitcher that I like quite a bit. He is a guy that was in, I'd say, the top 5 pitchers potentially in the draft. And I like this build of his, or at least the way that the build, you can kind of project it out in your head. It's about, there was a pitcher that I had traded for, and I'm trying to find him now where he actually is left off, that he reminds me of quite a bit. Here it is, D. Ward, who is over in Oakland. He kind of reminds me of that D. Ward potential build, where he's going to be like a low 80s control, mid to upper 80s power, and like a lower to mid 90s movement kind of guy. And those guys in the right stadium can pitch very well. So he kind of gives me that vibe. And if he kind of hits that projection, he could be very good. So I like this pick. I believe Dave and I talked about this pick post-draft or yesterday, or I'm not really sure what it was, but I do like Whedon quite a bit. He was definitely a guy that, as got closer to my pick, he was a guy that was at the top of my board. Him and the guy that we're going to talk about next, I believe, were the two guys at the top of my board, and sadly both went before I was able to get them. So, Gilly, what'd you think of Whedon?
He was deeper on my board for pitchers. I wasn't as high on him. Didn't have the greatest of amateur stats. He does have 3 pitches, so that's good. he's got some high health, high endurance. So that at times worries me. It's not an overall rule, but sometimes it does. So, yeah, I didn't have him as high, I think, as you did, Mizzy. But I could see the value in him. I see if he could be one of those guys that rounds out number 3 in your rotation if he gets some good jumps. So he's got some time to grow. Got a lot of room there to hit his peak. So I don't know. I don't know what Mogul's going to do with him. We'll find out though. It just wasn't as high on my list. So,
Maddie?
I guess it's interesting, Gil, that you don't like him because his build, almost his projection on my file, almost mirrors Bill Rowland. It's almost 1-for-1. It's crazy how close they are. I think they are very similar in the fact that, well, they're a power build. It's kind of interesting that Witten has a power build, but a 45% endurance rate, or 45% ground ball rate. Jesus Christ. So yeah, there's that. That's very interesting. For me, he took a big knock because of the home runs. I know overall low movement, yada yada yada, and he's real young, but can't get over the fact that when you're giving up 14 dingers in 78 innings and 10 dingers in 68 innings, that's high. That's unacceptable. Just cause for concern. He definitely could develop out of that, but it did take a big enough ding where certainly I would like other pitchers over him. Maybe not even that. I don't know if I'm saying at this point, but just overall in the draft. Good guy, good dude, could be a good pitcher, but wouldn't be surprised if he is like a McMurder Jr.
I mean, you mentioned it. That's why power guys, but not guys with home run in my part anyway.
All right, Milwaukee at 20 takes the guy that I would have taken at 11 had I picked at 11, and that is Luke Greenfield, 21-year-old third baseman extraordinaire. One of the prettier amateur stat combos that I saw this year in the draft, batting-wise. Clear home run hitter, big OPS guy. Walks are there, strikeouts there. Everything's kind of where you want to see it. And the fact that he might be able to play a relatively okay third base, it's just kind of icing on the cake. I would probably try him there for a sim or two and then just get doused by horrible pitching results and go shit and pull him real fast. But some people are ballsier than I am. I mean, some people try to start Osmart Snow at third base, so you never know what can happen. But at the very least, it should transition to a solid first baseman. And again, just icing on the cake for a guy that projects to be just a monster bat. I hate it when I watch division rivals pick really well in the draft. And I think Luke Greenfield is one of those guys that's a really good pick in the draft and should have gone much higher than it is here at 20. So, Maddie, other than the fact that you think he's a first baseman all the way, what do you think about Greenfield?
Well, that you're trying to play RH and to say, hey, no, try him at third base for a couple of sims so that you get a couple more losses inside of my division. Yeah, that, a very good bat. It's one of those guys that I think maybe falls through the cracks a bit just because people see him as a third baseman. Oh, he's not all that great defensively. I don't want that at third base. Yeah, well, consider that he can play first base now. Hell yeah. Gonna have probably mid 80s contact, mid 80s eye, and 90s power. And with defense, when you flip that over to first base, that should be pretty good. So, if his offense develops the way that it could, it's gonna be a very, very nice player on that side of the diamond, and he'll also add a few steals, it looks like, and what might not be a lot, may only be like 10, but how many first basemen are stealing 10 bags or so a year? I think this could very quietly be a really damn nice pick of this everyone thinking, Third baseman who can't play defense. I don't want him. Milwaukee might have lucked themselves into a stud number 3 or number 4 hitter.
I personally think they did. Gilly, what is your thoughts?
I agree. I think he could end up being one of the steals of the draft. Definitely first baseman. Would not try him at third. Sorry, Mizzy. Definitely first baseman, going to hit for power. Good amateur stats. As amateur stats, one of those weird guys that has a good year, bad year, good year, bad year, good year, bad year. But it is shocking that he has some stolen bases. I don't know what that'll translate into the major leagues, but good eye too. So I mean, if he progresses, his contact will get there. You're not afraid of like the contact being, one of those guys that hits low 90s power and barely gets above 70 contact, 72 contact. He'll be much higher than that. So like you guys said, I think he's going to be. We'll look back and maybe think, damn it, why didn't I look at Luke Greenfield? What was he on draft day? Maybe I should have thought of him at first base and not looking at his third base stats. So good good pick.
Or continue to do that anyway, and maybe they'll slip to me next time. Nevertheless, another third baseman, quote unquote, goes next to the Tigers. Tom Kiernan, 17-year-old, again, quote unquote, third baseman. He's not a third baseman. He is most certainly a first baseman. Or DH, goes next. Another guy, good amateur numbers. I don't think he quite hits for the power the Greenfield hits, but I think he has a lot sneakier power than people might realize, especially the fact that he is 17, won't be turning 18 until October. I like this guy. When I was looking at the 2 third basemen in the draft, it was Greenfield and Kiernan, and I was going back and forth on them quite a bit. Definitely would have taken Greenfield first, but had Kiernan slipped a little bit longer, definitely probably would have grabbed him just because I think his bat ends up being quite good. And I like the build, even though he's also definitely not an actual third baseman. So, Gilly, what'd you think about him? All right, Maddie, what'd you think about him?
I don't know what to think about him. Just first off, I would say always weary of a guy who is an extreme eye build. Those guys that just, even if their vitals get good in contact and power, that eye just seems to be a big distraction, basically. I've seen that way too many times. And then, of course, I see the health, and that's complete shit. So, I don't know. But when you project them out, projections do kind of like the bat. It projects them out into potentially elite contact. I'm surprised that it suggests that. And it still suggests pretty solid power and, of course, an elite eye. If that is true, which it does project out a 97 contact, 86 power, and a 100 eye. If he gets to that level, I don't know how he will not be successful. But
Right.
I question the contact getting there, because with the contact and power being equal, it really could go anywhere. You can look at his amateur numbers and go, hey, he's got some home runs there and some doubles there, so I can see where the power is going to do something. But will it do that? Will the contact shoot up like it suggests? The 400 average suggests sure. 361 backs that up a bit. It'll be interesting. I think more overall with the way his health is, he'd have to almost be a DH versus righties, and you can slot him in first base versus lefties to give your regular first baseman a little bit of a break. But if he's a full-time first baseman, he's not going to play very many games with a health of that nature. Just honestly, maybe one of the more interesting prospects in the entire draft is to see what the hell does Mogul do with his development, because it's just, you got me on what's going to happen. But there's a lot of upside there, and he's real damn young.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's very unique. It'll be intriguing to watch. Jared Mallett goes next, 17-year-old left-handed pitcher to the Twins. I will tell you that I don't like this player. His control is only 1 over, even though he is only 17. He's not a ground ball pitcher. Has a nice repertoire, but I mean, he's a movement monster, it appears, with a little bit of power. He reminds me of, and I know I always mention this guy in the draft, like, oh, this guy reminds me of this guy. But they do. Of the left-handed pitcher that auto pick would make a lot of sense, Mike. I thought Andy had been talking to him during the draft, right around when this pick was taken. But there was a guy that Hokie had in Florida and brought with him to Toronto that he kept trying to comp like he was a real good player. Even though like he pitched well in Toronto, like he had like a sub 3 or a 3 ERA, and he was a lefty. Yes, thank you, Mike Baji. Like he pitched much better than his vitals said he should have. So I think your best case scenario is you have a Baji on your hands, where he does end up with a low 70s control, but he still pitches well in the right parks. I don't think Minnesota is that park, especially after the Poldy experiment. So it'll be interesting.
The experiment was nerfed. I forget where it ended up, but it's not so stupid extreme anymore.
Well, that is comforting, but nevertheless, outside of the Florida park, I'm not sure where this guy plays and has even mild success, unfortunately. So, not a fan of the pick. I don't think these guys generally pan out.
Well, I'll say this. Yeah, it was definitely it wasn't an auto pick, so it's nothing against the Twins GM for this pick. I will say this. I think Andy might have told us how he does the auto picks. I kind of think he goes highest peak, then I think lowest overall is the tiebreaker. And I think out of all the guys that were at least at the 93 peak, I was glad, at least for Minnesota's sake, that they got Mallet because he is young. He does have a lot of upside, at least, so they weren't stuck with some 93, 75 peak that no one wanted for obvious reasons. The build is not good, but again, Mogul can do some weird things with that control when it's real low like that because of the sanity checks, and maybe somehow he becomes decent. He projects really interesting. My projections, they're really fucked up for him just because of his build. 73 contact, 83 power, and 100 movement.
Yeah.
Definitely don't believe that he's going to get to movement that high. 90s? Oh, hell yeah. But it'll be interesting if Mogul gives some of those movement boosts to control, and somehow he ends up in that the upper 70s, maybe even 80s control. That could be a very useful player.
Yeah, if he could be that 80, 95 guy, might not have a long career, but it looks a lot more interesting than that 70s, 80s, 100s guy. So we'll see. We'll see. We will move on to the next pick, and after that, we'll pick Gilly back up as he is now back from quote unquote step away for a second for kids. So we're not going to comment on that one. New York picks next, and they take Hideo Kamimoto, a 16-year-old relief pitcher. Again, outside of the fact that he's 16, I get wary when I see guys that are 48, 87 overall, and here are his 3 pitching stats: 52, 52, 52. I honestly can't remember the last time I saw a guy with straight set across the 3 major categories. He does have a high ground ball rate. He does have 3 pitches at or above his overall. I just don't know. I really don't know. I'm going to look over to see if I had him on my list at all, and I did not. I did not. I mean, 16. It's Mogul. So, but I can't bank on the 16. It's Mogul excuse every time with the draft pick. So, I'm not saying there was better players available. I think there was better players available. But I don't pick this guy. I'm gonna give my thumbs down for the second time this draft, and say I don't like this pick. Gilly, what'd you think of this pick?
So the things he's got going for him, he's got decent. Well, when you look at home runs to innings, not the best. Quick math, not the best. Never mind. So for a relief pitcher, that's a little concerning. Again, like you said, Mizzy, I don't think I've ever, from my memory, I don't remember seeing a straight set numbers either. That's quite interesting. I have to look back in the file and see. Got 3 decent pitches as his repertoire. Maddie thinks that's a little bit overrated. Probably is. So I don't know. He wasn't on my list either, Mizzy. So, or if he was way at the down the list. I don't know. This seems like a big gamble. I probably wouldn't have taken a relief pitcher either. Just seems like a little bit too much of a gamble for me.
I'll tell you what, Gilly. Let's play a fun little game of what do we think Maddie's file projects his control, power, and movement to be.
I don't look at Maddie's file, but if I was to project it, mid-70s control, low 70s power, and maybe some low 80s movement.
It's you're close and yet far away at the same time, and I think part of this is the fact that I don't ever remember seeing a guy that looked quite like this. He projects at a 63 control, a 68 power, and a 93 movement. So he projects to be one of those pitchers you would see in a NWO or NWU league, where these control monster relief pitchers that just look like trash on draft day and then end up being trash when they peak out. So I'm not saying he is going to be trash, but I'm saying I wouldn't have picked him. Maddie, what'd you think?
A couple things, and I forgot a lot of them. First thing, Gilly. Wow, you realize like mid-70s power is actually really damn good for a reliever, like a true reliever. That's like damn good. Mm-hmm. I don't know how he's gonna get to that. It'd be really fucking amazing. The other thing, and I forgot, but whatever. Moving on. If you will be very, very shocked here with me, I did not have him on my draft board. I know. It's surprising, seeing how I love Asians and Mogul. But yeah, even if I just pretend that his name is like Hugh Keller.
Should have gone with Wiener.
Okay, Kamimoto Wiener. I still say, holy shit, what the hell? Why would you like this guy ever? I mean, yeah, he's raw like a wiener at a 48 overall. And he has a nice ground ball rate. It usually happens when you can't throw the ball to home plate. It usually does end up on the ground. So he sucks. It's just all just a random dart throw to see if somehow most development system bails you out, because I don't know what anyone would see in this guy.
My guess is that Mass switches him to starting pitcher, waits for him to get a decent jump, and then tries to dump him on a new guy for a high price. But we'll see.
Oh, like a 133 draft pick and cash? Okay, yes.
Yeah, something like that. That would be no, that's not an MZ move, Dave. I'm much more subtle than that. Nevertheless, we'll see what happens, but I'm not a fan of the Hideo in this case. We'll move on.
So he's Nomo for you?
Nomo arigato. We'll move on to the Angels, who take Evan Dolan, second baseman, at 24th overall. This is a 19-year-old power bat with a good eye, who projects to have good power, good OPS. Not sure how well the defense plays. I mean, his amateur defensive stats actually are pretty solid. Not sure if that translates or not to the big show. contact is quite low, so I would have some concern about where that ends up. I'm not going to lie, he was on my list, even with the lower contact, because I think the power plays. And I think that the defense might be good enough to stick a second base and see where it goes. So I like where the Angels went on this, even though it might have been an auto pick. I think it was, now that I remember vaguely, before I just kind of pieced out on the draft, because I'm like, oh my God, this board is falling apart. But I like it. I think he's a decent player, should have a good bat, and should be worth playing. So, Gilly, what do you think?
Not a big fan. A little slow for my liking in the infield. Don't think the contact's going to get there. That would be a little bit of concern for me. Got some room to grow, so there is a possibility he could get there, but I just think he might turn out to be one of those guys that has a real low 70s contact, maybe high 60s contact. I don't know. He might not get there. But otherwise, I would have a harder time playing him myself. So I don't know whether he was an auto pick or not. So
it was. Mike is refreshed my memory on that. If I remember correctly, he has not posted a DC in Sim 3 or 4 and did not show for the draft. So we will see what happens to Cristal.
Yeah. So not the best auto pick. I'm not a big fan of Dolan.
Maddie.
I like him. You don't play him at second base. You play him at first base. When you do that, I like him. Guy projects to have 90 power and a solid eye. And contact that should be good enough. Should be in the low 70s at least. Be good enough. Good enough for a first baseman. Definitely not a second baseman, but I think, again, some of those guys that I think people go, oh, Ogle says he's this position, he's got to be this position. Think about where you can move him with our defensive flexibility now. You can move him over to first base, DH. And he has 17 home runs as a senior in high school. Fuck. The eye is a very high strikeout eye and a very high walk eye. So if he hits him out and he walks him out, fuck yeah.
Fuck yeah. Baltimore goes next, 25 overall, taking Christian Mata, a 19-year-old starting pitcher of the right-handed variety. Mata was not on my list, even though his amateur numbers are quite pretty. He was not on my list. Control at overall, movement above. He's got a good fastball, solid slider. He looks like one of those guys that ends up being like an 80 control, 90-something movement. They're good fifth starters, but not guys that I want to, or not one of those guys that I have to have on my team. So I wasn't really high on Mata. Again, he did not make my grade. But I mean, he could be a solid major leaguer, but I don't think he's the guy that you go, whew, how did he fall? I think he's the guy that you go, oh, yeah, okay, that makes sense. So, Maddie, what'd you think about Mata?
I think he should have fell even more, to be honest. He was on my list, but it's behind a lot of other guys just because of just kind of like you said, the movements is his best ability, and everything that we know about Mogul, the control is going to have a tough time catching up or being anything really good. Interesting though, kind of like you said, the home runs are really low, which again, is that to mean something, or is that because he has dynamite movement for a high school pitcher? We'll really see here with this one, because it's interesting, because Jamie does know what he's doing here. I would never knock him on that, but just with that build and all that, I'm not so sure that he's going to be anything exceptional. Like you said, he'll be a guy you can put in your rotation, certainly, but nothing to write home about.
Gilly, anything different?
No, nothing different there. I mean, he's good good amateur nurse for sure. So, but I'm with you guys. I just don't think the control gets there. Maybe a number 5 starter, maybe along with going to need some help along the way to get there. So, I'm not a big fan either.
All right. Next is the Astros, who are going into rebuild allegedly. Picking at 26, taking TJ McForrish, a 20-year-old ground ball pitcher of the right-handed variety. He boasts a high control, good power, and solid movement with 3 pitches all above his overall. I did like McForrish. He was definitely a guy that was on my list. Again, much like the gentleman that I talked about earlier and a gentleman that I'll talk about here, I believe with the next pick, a guy that has the potential to be that typical 90s guy in the ground ball pitcher variety that you'd like to see. So I liked TJ. I think that he could end up being quite a good pitcher when it's all said and done. Again, especially if he hits that 90 control, 90 movement. I think with that power that he has, that power should be pretty high as well. Not 90s high, but upper 70s, maybe low 80s high, which could make him very good pitcher once he hits the big league. So big fan of TJ. I think Houston makes a good pick there.
Yeah, you really like the build. The ground ball rates there, the control is the leading vital. No issues on the home runs, and that's especially pretty cool with a 53 overall and a 53 movement guy. And if we want to look into that next file, just a little bit of him since you did just age. He did drop 4 peak, which some people, oh no, he dropped 4 peak. Oh, I don't want him. A 4 peak drop is probably actually just a normal drop. We're just kind of used to seeing some guys drop maybe 2 or 3 points and thinking that's what it should be. And really, I think a 4 peak drop is normal, and he still has a lot of time to develop where that kind of a drop shouldn't deter you at all. It's a guy who, if he peaks out before he's 25, I'll be shocked. So, with a long time to develop, be a really nice pitcher.
Yeah, I think that 4 or even 3 peak drop is probably average, and anything above that is just above average or extraordinary. So
right, exactly.
Yeah, it's when they drop 6 or 7. That's when my concern really starts to hit. Gilly, what'd you have on McForrish?
Yeah, I like him. Good value here at 26. Like Maddie said, I like the fact that his home run rate's low, even with that 53 movement. So that's nice. Yeah, with a 4 drop, if Houston wants to let him go, you can let me know. I'm still interested in him. So good 3 pitches that are all below his overall. So yeah, I like him. I think, like I said, a good value here at 26. Maybe could have gone a little sooner even. So yeah, I like him.
All right. Next pick, 28, the Pittsburgh Pirates take Ivan the Sandwich Cubano, a 22-year-old starting pitcher of mixed pedigree. Amateur stats are pretty good. Really good strikeout to walkout ratio for a guy that doesn't project to have a lot of power. Home runs are okay. Not great, not bad. I mean, 1 per 8. Yeah, I'll take 1 per 8. That's pretty good. Not great, but good enough. High ground ball rate, really high control, solid movement. Again, lower power, 4 pitches. So a pretty robust repertoire for those that care about that kind of thing. Projects out to be pretty solid. Again, at this part of the draft, with McForrish going right before this, and a lot of the bats off the board, I wasn't sure which way I was going to go. It was actually between this guy and a guy that Maddie took in the 2nd round. And I ended up going with the guy that I thought had slightly better amateur stats. But again, this is a guy that I think hits 90 control, 90 movement, with hopefully like that low 70s power. Something that could be a pretty good pitcher for a time. So we'll see. But again, this part of the draft, there was no bats left worth taking. So I took a pitcher that I thought had some upside. Gilly, what did you think about Cubano?
I'm not a big fan. Not a lot of room there to grow. I'm not like you said. You didn't mind the home run rate. It's a little high for me, at least for my park. So I'm not a huge fan of those rates. Not a great fastball. Decent ground ball rate, but again, I look at more of the home run rate per innings. A little older and not as much room to grow. I don't think is there. So these guys that have such high control and overall their compared to their vitals, I know I've seen some success in the past, but I've also seen some busts as well. So a few more than success, I think. So I don't know. I know the draft was getting a little thin here. I don't see the upside maybe as much as maybe you do. So that's where I'm at.
Maddie.
Gilly, you played baseball at an elite level, right?
Maybe.
Okay, so isn't the cutter short for cut fastball?
Yeah.
So he does actually throw a really damn nice fastball.
This is mogul.
But he throws a damn nice fastball, which is his cutter. It's a cut fastball.
Okay.
And the fact that he does throw one really good pitch will be the thing for Mogul to say, "Hey, throw this pitch." I don't know if it really matters for the lineup of pitches, and really the pitches again, they don't really fucking matter anyways. But I do agree with you the fact of that he's gonna be one of those pitchers that looks like he's gonna be really tempting, really good. Vital is all above the overall, and it just doesn't really turn out that well. I think even more so, even if he does turn out really well, that really low health is going to play into things of where you're going to get like 25 starts out of him. Like, who gives a fuck? Give me 30 starts. Fuck. And of course, yeah, the home runs. The fact that he is advanced and the control and movement gap is 10. This would have me a little bit concerned. I don't know. It's tough. He has good vitals to the overall. Really good vitals to the overall. Some decent upside, good ground ball rates. But the home runs, the gap. Yeah, I'll go with 3.75, 4.0 ERA pitcher. That Mizzy will try and trade to a newbie for first through third. Because look at the vitals. Look at the vitals. He has 90 control. Don't look at the stats. No. He'll get better in your home run park.
Don't hate the player, hate the game. All right. At 28, Cleveland takes John Bradford, a 20-year-old left-handed pitcher who has already passed his birthday and looks to be a power pitcher. He has an extremely low ground ball rate, sitting at 20, but he has quite good amateur stats and low home run totals. There's a lot to like about this, including his high fastball and good slider. He was a guy that was on my list, and I chose to go a different direction, and it might bite me in the ass. Bradford might end up being much better than Cubano in the long run. I like Bradford. I think it's a good pick, especially, again, in this late round where got to my pick, and I was struggling, honestly, just because everything seemed to have dissipated, and anything else I thought about taking should have still been there a round or two later. So I like to pick Bradford. Maddie, you took Bradford. What do you think? Presumably you liked him.
Somewhat. He actually was not on my list to start out. I added him midway through the first round because I started looking at him a little bit more. The big thing was that the low birthday drop kind of really kind of sold me on him. To be honest, my real pick at this point was my my second rounder. But I played a game of, I figured Bradford being a power pitcher and how some people kind of like that now, and the low birthday drop might have someone taking him in between that pick and my next pick. Maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong. However, I ended up with both of them, so I really don't fucking care. I really don't like the ground ball rate. That's not at all what I want. It concerns the hell out of me. But the big thing for me is even if I decide he's not going to be a starting pitcher, I can just go throw him in the bullpen and maybe he'll be my closer as setup man.
All right. Gilly.
Yeah, I'm Izzy. I'm actually surprised this wasn't your pick instead of Cubano. I mean, you've shown to pick guys like this before. Who was the guy? Berryman. Wasn't Berryman similar numbers to this?
I didn't pick Berryman. TT picked Berryman.
Oh,
But,
Yeah, but he gave up a lot more home runs than Bradford could ever dream of giving up.
Well, he had so he had low ground ball rate. He had good fastball, kind of a power pitcher. From what I remember, I'd have to go back and look. But this guy is, I don't know, he's kind of strange. I see it. He kind of makes my head hurt. I see the low ground ball rate, or at least in Mogul, but he doesn't give up a lot of home runs. Great fastball. I think he's either gonna be. I think it was a good pick at this spot. Don't get me wrong. I think he's either gonna be really good or really bad. I don't think there's gonna be a lot of in between. So he may project out like a 75, upper 70s, 90, 95 guy if he hits, which would be really good for this pick. So I think that's what Maddie's gonna hope for here. I don't know. I'd have to look. Maddie, I don't know what your park is for home runs. I haven't looked, so it may not be an issue for you.
But
I don't know.
you are right that I hope that he's good and not shitty.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't think. I just don't see a middle ground here. I see really good or not real good. So it could be end up one of those guys we look back and say, what did he look like on draft day? Oh my God, he's an all-star, and now it changes everybody's mind on like that 20% low ground ball rate. Those guys aren't terrible. So people start picking them sooner in the draft. So who knows?
I hope so, because they'll leave more ground ball pitchers for me.
yeah.
I'm not for you to take a guy like that.
Yeah.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Peter picks 29. Peter takes Peter Perry. Peter Perry picked a peck of pickled peppers. Peter Perry is a guy that when I saw his name come off 2 picks after me, I said, shit, that was another guy that I meant to relook at before I committed to somebody. Phenomenal defensive third baseman. Bat is a little bit undetermined. Ick is not the worst word I would use. I mean, he had one really good year there in high school, one solid year, then a couple meh years. So it'll be a tale of which bat do you get. Do you get that senior year of high school bat? 'Cause if you do, he ends up being a very good player. But he was a guy that I know didn't project overly well, and I was a little bit him-ha on. He was actually a weird color on my draft board. Not a guy to go after, but not a guy to ignore. Really, his defense is the thing that really stands out as something that could make him a good player. I think the problem with it is his eye is so horribly low that it's not going to get anywhere. And you wonder how much that might have an effect on his bat once it fully progresses. But we all know Peter's been looking for a high defensive third baseman for a number of years now, continually asking everybody who has one if they're willing to trade them. So I think he finally just gave up on that dream and just took one for himself. So we'll see how Perry progresses. And if he ends up just being a defensive third baseman or if he does get a little bit of a bat to go with him. So, Gilly, what do you think about Perry?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think draft maybe didn't see anything further in the draft that he cared all that much about. We'll find out whether he advances on his power or not. I mean, he did show some power his senior year. I don't know. He's going to have to catch a good winter ball. But I don't doubt Peter's drafting ability. So I'm sure there's some number that he knows that we're not at to say, oh, Peter Perry's going to be a great pick. So, yeah, it's probably it was pick 29, getting late in the draft. He went out of a position of need more so than maybe he would have in the past.
All right, Maddie, real quick, because we are running out of room here for this podcast.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of it. You can see the defense; it's great and all, but the eye, it's one of those Low walk, low strikeout eyes. I think that'll take away from the contact, and I don't think there's enough there for the rest of the way to make him anything spectacular.
All right. And the last pick of the round went to St. Louis, and I'll be the only one to talk about this pick just to save a little bit of time. And that is Chris Appio, an 18-year-old right-hander with a little bit of speed and a little bit of range and a little bit of center field ability. This was an interesting pick. He's a guy that really came on the last 2 years in high school. He was on my draft board. I think he ends up being a middling bat, low 80s control power, mid 80s speed with a low eye and decent defensive ability. So I think he ends up being a solid center fielder, but nobody that you're really looking forward to write home about. So we do have to end the podcast now. It is the end of the first round, and we're running at the end of it with ability for Pawa. So we are going to say good night and good luck at this point. But for those of you in chat, please stick around and